What's that coming over the hill? Is it a reboot? Is it a reboot? Yup. It's a reboot, alright. And boy, did they make a reboot. So, Bob the Builder. You probably know what it is, and it's a franchise that needs no introduction. But just like a certain blue train, it got a brand spanking new reboot. Seriously though, what's even left to say about this mess that hasn't been said before on the internet? Sure, there's better mediocre redesigns than all engines go, but most, if not every episode, feel the exact same. The team is on a job, they start building, someone messes up the project collapses, and then they fix the project. Hooray! I'm not saying that kids shows with repetitive stories are bad, but they can work well if the subject matter is interesting enough for a 10-minute episode. Take Phineas and Ferb for example. But the Bob the Builder reboot simply has none of that charm in each episode because of the overused music, recycled scripts, and annoying characters. You would think for a flop of a show like this, with poor merchandise sales and terrible writing, that nothing good would come out of it. Well, except for one thing. Bob the Builder, the movie. Mega Machines, a 1-hour feature that was supposed to be this show's answer to the Thomas and Friends specials, such as Hero of the Rails or Legend of the Lost Treasure. A movie that has a admittedly similar structure to every episode of the reboot, but it takes things in an interesting and bold direction that the reboot episodes could only dream of. Now then, let's find out what this movie's about, shall we? So, this movie follows Bob the Builder and his gang building a giant dam on the outskirts of Spring City. He enlists the help of Conrad, the contractor, and his mega machines, Ace, Todd, and Crunch. Little does Bob know that Conrad is an evil man, who has a secret agenda to destroy Bob the Builder's reputation by causing a dam to flood Spring City. Conrad threatens to literally scrap his machines if they get in the way of his plan. Yet, Ace and Scoop form a friendship as Scoop idolized Ace all his life. Ace then lies to Scoop about what he's doing in secret, and Scoop tries to play a tattletale on him, but uh-oh, Conrad lies to Bob. Bob then tells Scoop off before he can realize the dam is breaking, therefore Bob realizes that he was in the wrong. Spring City almost gets flooded, but thanks to Ace and Scoop, they save the day and Conrad is given consequences for his actions by getting arrested and sent to community service. Based from what I said, the story is surprisingly grand for not only the Bob the Builder reboot, but the Bob the Builder franchise itself. And this movie is the perfect setting for a Bob the Builder special. A gigantic build with higher stakes and conflict. However, my first negative is that the formula is the same. The team is on a job building, someone messes up the project collapses, and then they fix the project. Yay! While this is the weakest part of the movie, I'd argue that this movie does a good job of making an overdone plotline actually interesting. There are high stakes and emotional moments that make you care about this story. Not to mention the execution differs from the norm. The protagonist doesn't mess up the project this time, but rather the antagonist, especially with Conrad's motives being more malicious rather than being for fun. The team still fixes the project by the end of this thing, but this time, it feels earned due to the risky situation that happened before. Not to mention that this movie does something that even the Bob the Builder is scared to do, having an antagonist. And I will get to that in a later segment. Another positive of this movie's plot is how daring it is for Bob the Builder. The mention of scrapping and implication of death by flood is surprisingly dark and something the original show would never dare to mention. The mention of scrapping as a threat is something straight out of classic Thomas. And another thing the original stop motion show was scared to do, let alone tell. There is a minor subplot that bothers me. There's a subplot about Muck trying to befriend Todd and Crunch, but he's scared and such, oh no. And by the end, they become friends. You could remove that plot from the story and nothing would change at all. It serves as dumb filler. Though at least the story isn't annoying compared to like most plotlines in the reboot. They easily could have involved them in the climax to help Ace and Scoop in some way if the people at Mainframe and Mattel were to keep that subplot and were smart. But despite these issues, this special has a good plot that takes advantage of the overdone formula and retools it into an engaging story that takes advantage of being a full-blown Bob the Builder movie. While there are many characters present, the main highlight of this movie is Conrad the Contractor, Bob the Builder's rival. He puts the word con in his name to good use. He's a despicable, deceiving, and abusive man who, for the Thomas fans out there, is the Sailor John of the Bob the Builder franchise. Two human villains with power over their respective vehicle and companions, while having an agenda hidden from the rest of the cast till the climax. He poses a good threat to Bob and his team because of his plan to destroy Spring City. The new characters are cool too. Ace provides a good father figure to the young Scoop, and their bond is pretty wholesome. The two other Mega Machines, Todd and Crunch, are pretty aggressive towards Muck and Lofty. While not that interesting compared to Ace, both are more examples of antagonistic characters in Bob the Builder. With that said, I still don't like the voices of the main trio. All the complaints about their voices from the All Engines Go videos still persist. However, their personality traits aren't amplified thankfully and are extremely toned down. We don't see Scoop and Muck being stupid and dumb often, and when they are, it's to a minimum. We don't see them messing up a project or having a ridiculous idea either. Same with Lofty's sarcasm. That too is toned down. They're done decently in this movie and aren't as aggravating as in the actual reboot. The rest of the characters like Bob, Wendy, Leo, Two-Ton, Stretch, Tread, etc. are fine. They don't have any arcs, but they are important to the plot as they serve to start building the dam and to save the city at the end. And I wish they had more to do in this film if this film was given more time. But alas, this movie is 1 hour long. Maybe in hindsight, I think it was a good idea that they weren't focused on, given much of it would have made the movie more bloated and unfocused with like 50 plots going on. Also, I have one nitpick, but where are Rolly and Dizzy? For a big scale Bob the Builder movie, they aren't in it, but at the same time, I understand because they would have made the movie more bloated than it needs to be. In a movie with one unnecessary plot, adding more would have made the movie way more unfocused. However, a good workaround for this is to make them serve the same purpose as, say, Two-Ton or Stretch in this movie. Just side characters that barely do anything in the movie except for the start and the climax of this thing. But then again, they aren't focused much in this reboot, so maybe Mattel and Mainframe hate Rolly and Dizzy, huh? In short, the characters are 50-50. It's either really great or horrifically underused. But something really good and consistently good about this movie is the animation. Let's keep this short and sweet, y'all, because this applies to the reboot as a whole and not just this movie. The animation is rock solid, all things considered. It's pretty good for television CGI, but nowhere near as good as Brenner era Thomas CGI, if that's a neat comparison. It looks better than Chuggington, but overall it's just decent CGI. As I mentioned earlier, this show is animated by Mainframe Entertainment, famous for working on Reboot and Transformers Beast Wars. But they previously had a history with Mattel for animating the direct-to-video Hot Wheels and Barbie movies of the 2000s. And seeing this animation shows how far they've come with Mattel. All the characters move smoothly and all the vehicle characters are pretty expressive, but not to the point of being hyperactive, unlike another Mattel reboot. This movie takes advantage of CGI animation in ways that the previous CGI Bob incarnation, Ready Steady Build, could only dream of. The large-scale dam, plus the gigantic Mega Machines, lend themselves well to the CGI animation, as it proves the advantage of this reboot being in 3D space. This is what the reboot should do with its new medium. Do things the original stop-motion show was restricted from doing. There's one nitpick I have in the animation department, and while the vehicles and humans are realistic, the trees and mountains aren't. A part of me wonders if the original intent for this reboot was to have a cartoony art style like the original, but hey, who knows? While everybody and their mother have talked to death about the terrible writing and redesigns of this reboot, I'm glad I checked the special out. Overall, this reboot itself is worse than All Engines go for having formulaic writing and annoying characters. At least AEG was smart enough to not recycle the same stories over and over again. However, Mega Machines outdoes everything AEG does in terms of writing and improving upon the original's tone. So that makes the Bob the Builder reboot better than AEG by the long shot. Bob's reboot is a double-edged sword for me, as it does something pretty good and terribly wrong simultaneously. Then again, Bob the Builder isn't something I passionately love as much as Tommy the Tank, so I feel more disdain for AEG on a personal bias level. For Mega Machines itself, this movie has a lot of good things with a few bad things. Despite using that infamously repetitive plot, a weak subplot, and annoying voices from the trio, this movie is surprisingly decent, and it's the best thing to come out of this reboot by default. I would argue that the things this movie did are what the reboot should have focused on updating instead of completely changing the art style. The Bob the Builder reboot could have been a more emotionally driven, more serious kids show while still being a fun cartoon that supersedes the original. Imagine how respected this movie would have been like if it just improved upon the original. The Bob the Builder franchise is dead in the water as of the writing of this video, but the franchise might get another reboot someday? Maybe? A script for a Bob the Builder reboot is in the early works on Mattel reportedly by Marcy Kelly, according to this New Yorker article. Who knows? Maybe this reboot is in the style of the original with Lego Movie-esque CGI to replicate stop motion. Or it could be another gritty live action movie with The Rock as Bob, like the one test trailer Hit Entertainment did back in 2012. Well, the future of Bob the Builder is uncertain. And until something like 2067, that is all for now. This has been Waxter. Like, comment, and subscribe. And most importantly of all, stay wacky! Now that we've gotten this out of the way, let's finally get to the highly anticipated Mighty Express review that I've teased at least 3 times. This is gonna be a real train wreck! So, see you till then!